What's going on, everybody? I'm on my way to Montana for this Rifle 1 and 2 class that we're getting ready to do, which is going down actually tomorrow. And I was getting kind of sleepy. I've been on the road since noon yesterday, nonstop. And what better way to wake up than to scream at my fucking windshield for a while, because I am like an hour away from where I need to be, and the Montana roads decided to turn into fucking Afghanistan roads, complete with water sprayers for dust. So, anyhow, let's talk about this, right? Because this comes up a lot, especially when people see me manipulate handguns, more often than not, guys that don't train very hard. Because when you start talking about stuff like this, you know, people get very touchy about it, and they don't actually explore it. So, do you rack the slide, or do you use a slide stop lever or a slide release, whatever people want to call it? It really is fucking irrelevant, because I do both things. So, point is, do you use the switchy thingy on the slide to drop it? Or do you run the slide? Or do you run the charging handle on an AR, or press the bolt release / lock? And this goes with anything else that has those features, because I can't apply this to an AK because obviously it's barely post-World War II technology. So let's talk about this then, right? Now, I used to be the person that actually ran slides on Glocks. If you go back in my videos and that kind of stuff, you would see me advocating it, and you would also see me jacking slides on Glocks over and over. Yeah, see what I'm telling you? Afghanistan roads. They even got the steamrollers out here, man. So the point that I'm making is, I used to believe in that kind of stuff because, you know, when people start talking about how, oh, when you get really excited, you start losing your ability to manipulate switches and that kind of stuff, and you take yourself back to points where you were like super scared and you couldn't handle objects and that kind of thing, it makes sense to you. But over time, I figured out a couple of things, because I've continued to study and grow and evolve and that kind of stuff, and I've gotten better and better and better as time goes on. And what's wild about that is people slip off of slides too when they jack them, right? People miss ping pong paddles on ARs. They also slip off of charging handles on ARs too. So what does this mean? What this means is, if you're not proficient, you're not proficient. So if you're not doing one of those things, if you slip off of that charging handle or slide, or if you're missing that ping pong paddle or that slide lock lever, although that's very difficult to do. It's very, very difficult to miss a slide lock lever because it's like literally on your thumb. But point is, though, well, if you're not proficient, you're not proficient. You need to train, and you need to work on that thing, and you need to be proficient, because guys that shoot dudes have done this for a long time. Now, the theology on this is that when you get excited, when you got adrenaline coursing through your body and that kind of stuff, what happens is you lose your ability to work your fine motor skills. And how this is often described, to a point fairly inaccurately, is it's single-digit manipulations on single switches, oftentimes referred to as small switches. Now, here's the deal. No, that's not how that works. Because what's wild about it is that these same people that talk about this gross motor skill stuff, that, you know, you have to jack the slide on a handgun, doesn't matter what it is. What's kind of wild about that is that pressing a trigger is a single-digit manipulation on a individual switch that actually makes a levering motion. And that has far greater consequences to screwing up under stress, because every bullet that you fire at a guy in self-defense has a receipt attached, and we're trying to not grape people that didn't earn it, right? So if we can do that under stress, why can't I press down on a thing? Why can't I press a magazine button either? Well, you can, because they never say that you can't press a magazine release button either. So you can do those first two things, right? Which, just based off of the anatomy of the hand, they're actually much harder things to do in a controlled manner, because when you're gripping something, it's harder to make your thumb do this and your index finger to do this under stress than it is to prep an object, and then the second that your base plate makes contact with your frame, you press down on that object that you've already referenced, because it's usually a sharp-edged thing that you're referencing. So what's actually kind of wild about that whole deal is proficiency is proficiency, right? And if you don't have it, you don't have it. You need to train. So what I find kind of baffling about that entire thing is when you're inserting a magazine into a handgun, right, and you have that thing prepped, because it's that sharp-edged thing that you have prepped, and you're just sitting it there. You're not pressing on anything. You're just sitting it there. You have the reference. You know what it feels like. It's there. All you really have to do is condition yourself to do two deliberate actions. It is quite literally a impact drop. Okay? What we're not trying to do is make it instantaneous or happen at the same time, although they're very close to the same time. We're not trying to make them happen at the same time, because that's when you get proficiency issues and you outrun your slide lock lever thumb with your base plate. So you drop the slide before you intended to, and then you create a problem you were never trying to deal with in the first place, because now you got to come over the top and jack the slide. There it is, right? Or I've seen it under something as simple as a timer, never mind dude being actually scared, or in a force-on-force scenario where dude's trying to mind the fact that he's on a two-way range now, and people slip off of slides. I've slipped off of slides before. If it's hot enough, if I'm absolutely smothered in wetness, whether it be sweat or wet shit falling from the sky, I've slipped off of slides too, right? It's happened before, because it's two different motions. Because here's the other thing, when they talk about the gross motor skill thing, they say, well, that's how you fix problems on a handgun anyway. Actually, no, because they are two totally different feels. A pistol slide in battery is totally different as far as feel and force required than it is for a pistol slide in slide lock, because all you're trying to do is unlock the slide and let go, and you're pulling back on the slide just enough to where that son of a bitch lets go, and then you let go of the slide. And if you're on any kind of two-way range, whether it's life-threatening or not, guys are going to try to get that slide to go home as fast as possible. And what happens is, if they don't grip those serrations correctly, and they're trying to get the slide to go home as quickly as possible, right? And again, this is a proficiency thing, right? They won't pull back, or they won't grip hard enough to get the slide to unlock and then let go, right? So there's issues that you can have with regards to that as well. And the funny thing is that guys that are too used to slide lock reloads, because I've done this and I've watched people do this, is if they have any sort of stoppage on their handgun, right? Let's just pick failure to fire as one, right? If they're too used to doing slide lock reloads like that, they'll go into that motion with the same amount of pressure that they would for a slide lock reload and slip off of that slide too, because it takes comparatively significantly more force to jack the slide on that frame, right? But here's the thing. Fixing a problem is different from normal operation of the handgun, okay? Normal operation of the handgun is boom, 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 slide lock, reload, chink, and here we go. Versus boom, 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 click, holy shit, and then we go back to work. They're two separate actions, and even if you're doing this for the reload or to fix a problem, they're still two totally different tactile feeling things. Okay? Now, two very well-versed practitioners of either method, they're not going to be too terribly different as far as how far away they are apart from each other. However, one is just more efficient. There's less hand movement, there's less wasted movement in general, because doing this is less efficient than having to simply press down on an object after you've inserted that magazine. So while it might not be that much, it still exists. Okay? And the fact that it exists should get your attention, because time is life. We got to deal with this right now, and for some ridiculous reason, my handgun just went into slide lock. That's a real oh shit moment, so this needs to be done as fast as possible. So if you are training to a professional level, meaning you have trained so hard at this that you're trying to create circumstances that make you fail, like across the board, not even just including that reload. But if you're doing that, then you're not really going to have that much of an issue, because mechanically speaking, there's less shit for you to do, right? So there's all that. And what's wild about the handgun too is that, again, this is a fine motor skill, and it's a levering motion that still has to travel as straight to the rear as possible, because the bullets are only going to go where the sights are, right? And they go where the sights are every time. It's just whether or not you introduce movement. So trying not to move the handgun under time-is-life critical stress, that's a tall order if you're supposedly not able to push down with the leverage that you have, with the orientation of the hand that you currently have at the moment, when this is supposedly harder than this. Okay? As far as body mechanics go, and I know a lot of us have heard that word before. Thank you, Travis. I don't understand how this is harder or less hard or more doable than this is right here. Or instead of this, it's this. Okay? How is this a inward pressing motion when you already have most of your hand gripped on something, and now you're supposed to touch an individual object and press inward toward your knuckles? How is that biomechanically easier to do than that? And it's wild because you have to be willing to challenge a thing that you already think is right, and then admit that you were wrong in believing in the first place, to do better, right? To actually evolve, to actually stay relevant, because shit changes as we go. A lot of times, a lot of things stay the same. Like, for instance, appendix carry's been around for hundreds of years at this point, and people now are thinking that it's somehow dangerous, when appendix carrying a flintlock is somehow less dangerous than an auto-loading pistol with 1 million built-in safety features and Kydex holsters. That point aside, you have to be willing to evolve. So, as far as just biomechanically speaking, how is that? How are these things more ridiculous? Now, and what's funny is that, like, if I've asked this question before, and then they say, oh, well, it's your brain's ability to process all these little things, trying to do those little things. Okay, well, if we're going to take it to the brain processing arena, explain to me how lining up a handgun, set of iron sights, taking the thing that's farther away from your face, getting that clear, putting it in the center of the thing that's closer to your face, keeping this blurry, keeping it on that thing that's blurry, tracking what that fucker is doing, and all the other things around him, right? How is that, as far as mental processing, not a fine motor skill? To be able to do all of those things and to maintain the center of your visual acuity on that. How is that not a fine motor skill? And as far as mental taxation is concerned, how is that anywhere near acceptable when I can't do this? It doesn't make sense to me. Which I mean, if you could just focus on the bad guy area and then throw a red dot up, I mean, that would be a whole lot simpler, but whatever, moving that along, because I've already done that video. So it's kind of wild to me, right? So now let's talk about rifles for a second. First and foremost, I used to exclusively run the charging handles on my ARs, like all the time. And you want to know something wild? When you go to yank on that charging handle, right? What you do is that you take the charging handle and when you pull on it on one side, it turns the whole thing, right? So it wears on one particular side of that charging handle far more than the other. And if you train your ass off, and I do, what you're gonna eventually do is one of two things, or both. The roll pins holding together the latches on that bastard, especially if you're not using a GI charging handle, because why the hell would you? But eventually, the roll pins holding that son of a bitch together are going to try to walk. Like, for instance, on a Raptor. They're going to try to walk because you're introducing so much movement so consistently that it can't help but move. It's not designed to constantly move like that. It's also not designed to constantly do this over and over again. That's not part of the standard operating procedure on that rifle. The second thing that can or will happen if you continue at this is you're going to figure out that the charging handle on an AR really isn't your friend unless you're fixing a real problem, like trying to lock the action in the rear or something like that, because eventually you'll bend one or two. Ask me how I know. And that's really, when you bend one of those things, a critical component like that in your rifle, you brick it now, right? Like, this thing is not usable anymore. Like, it's bent. If you half L-shape that bastard, that rifle will not work anymore because the metal thing is not just going to slinky its way back into place. It's not going to do that, okay? So, sorry if I could cause a critical failure of the rifle just trying to get it started up. That sends alarm bells into my head, right? Now, pressing a ping pong paddle, yeah, I've missed it before. Everybody misses it when they're not good. That really is it. When they're not good, they miss. This is how it goes, okay? And anytime I've worn gloves, which is quite often with rifle, it about never happens. It's so rare that I miss that ping pong paddle. It better be in the pitch dark. I have no lights, which really shouldn't be happening at all, for the most part. Pitch dark, I have no lights, and I am in the goofiest position on the planet. And you know that you're really starting to get pretty good at it too when you can do the crap under night vision, right? Because you're focused over, like, your nod focus is over there. It's not right in here. So if you can just bap and you're good, it's really not all that hard. And the funny thing is too, is that, like, when guys go into that, again, it's a body mechanics issue. When they come in, a lot of times they stay in that beer can grip, when as you approach that magazine well, you should probably flare out that thumb so that you can insert the magazine like so, right? Because you're still using your whole goddamn hand. And when you get that insert, your thumb is literally ready to go. It's got to move about this far and then you can press. It's pretty simple, and it's pretty hard to screw up. Also, the next thing that you got to look into is, of all the things that I've heard as far as the teething trouble with ARs and guys that had big problems with them and that kind of stuff for this, that, and the other, like when, special operations teams and that kind of stuff were trying to turn the original M4 into a squad automatic rifle and it wasn't made for that and they were blowing shit up. And, before the M4A1 days or the SOP-MOD program and all that, right? Of all the problems I've ever heard reported by troops in the field, reports that were written up by guys, even people trying to kill the program entirely when it was first being made, you want to know what was never complained about, ever, on the M16 M4 program? Guys missing the ping pong paddle, okay? And a lot of people watching this are likely better gun handlers than a lot of those troops back then and now. Yeah, obviously, there's going to be disparities in there because we got a lot of special operations dudes right now. They've existed prior. Good gun handlers, fucking whatever. You get my point, though. I train up a lot of guys from a lot of different professions, guys that have never suited up a uniform in their lives, and the dude is like a dentist, and he's slaying dragons all day. So, and he can hit that son of a bitch every time. So, like, that 18-year-old kid that's dumber than a shovel in some unit somewhere, if he can hit that ping pong paddle pretty consistently, I don't think it's a problem. When jacking the charging handle all the time, it can be. Now, a problem that I hear people say all the time is, well, this has happened a million times where I go to insert a magazine, then I press the ping pong paddle and it won't strip that fresh magazine. Doesn't matter how clean the first round off that magazine. I don't care how clean my rifle was, and blah, blah, blah. See, this is another proficiency issue, because, especially if they're used, really used, If you're loading GI mags or P mags or whatever until they stop and you literally can't push down anymore with new rounds into that magazine's overloaded. Okay? A 30-round magazine is designed to have about this much give once you push down on that 30th round, because it has to be able to move out of the way of the bolt when you insert it on a closed bolt. If you load those rounds until the magazine stops cold, you're going to have those issues because the magazine's overstuffed to 31 or in some cases 32. It's not a 31-round magazine. It's not a 32-round magazine. It is a 30-round magazine. And if you go over those projected parameters, you will have bolt sticking issues as far as just being able to strip the first round off of that magazine. And on top of that, you obliterate the feed lips on your magazine far quicker than it ever should have been. So that's a you problem, not a machine problem, because you took a 30-round magazine and operated outside of its design parameters. Okay, and a lot of guys, a lot of times me included, especially when I'm doing like a high volume class and I'm doing a lot of demos or I'm taking a class, I'll load them all the way until they stop. I can't move them anymore, and I'll drop 2 out just to make sure that in case it's a 32, it's a 30. More often than not, it ends up a 29. That's okay, though. I still got 29, right? But I make sure that my rifle's going to properly function in both of those categories, right? And I'm not obliterating the feed lips on my magazines over and over. So, there you go. And this goes for any other rifle that's got a similar feature to it, like a similar bolt drop type feature. I don't really give a shit what it is, right? It was designed for the dude to insert a magazine and press a release and the fucking bolt goes forward. If you start operating outside those design parameters, most of the time, especially on a lot of modern firearms now, the charging handle exists to fix problems. It doesn't exist to operate the firearm, right? In its normal capacity. Like if it's a SCAR, or if it's, good lord, any other, like pretty much any modified G36 action or really AR-180 action. Like a SCAR, an ACR, a Tavor, a fucking M4, anything that's got that insert drop type system to it is not designed to be specifically reliant on that charging handle. Now, there's much tougher charging handles out there for sure than an AR charging handle. Most of them are, but you catch my drift though, right? So why would we deliberately go against the design parameters of firearms for no reason in that case, right? Now, here's the next thing. What I hear all the time is, oh, well, I got an AR and an AK, so I might as well keep the similar motions. I got a question to ask. What is the difference, or what really is similar about doing a straight insert and jacking a charging handle this way, or doing a rocking insert and charging it this way? There's nothing similar about any of those motions whatsoever. Okay? And the next one, oh, well, it just works with every firearm, so, it's no big deal. Last I checked, I know they're not as popular, anywhere near as popular, but last I checked, it's kind of hard to do that shit, just insert on a closed bolt and run the charging handle on an M14, but it locks itself to the rear, so we can throw that one out if we want to. What that's not going to work on is a G3 pattern rifle of some kind. Like, the G3 is notorious for, you have to lock that son of a bitch to the rear. Okay? Yeah, they're not very popular guns, but you know what is? MP5 style guns. And those are assholes to try and insert a magazine on a closed bolt on. Matter of fact, most people that know their shit on MP5s, even when you're topping off the gun, you still lock the bolt to the rear and insert the new magazine, because you're not sitting there trying to beat on it, trying to force it in, because it straight up doesn't really want you to do that. It's designed to have this son of a bitch locked to the rear, insert, drop it. And there's still a lot of fucking people that use MP5 style guns, right? And as far as handguns, okay, for the most part, I'll give it to you. Insert and jack the slide, okay, cool. Yeah, that works pretty well for the most part. You start running into issues about what you can grasp when you come over the top and jack the slide on like a CZ75 style gun or a 1911 with ambidextrous manual safeties on it, because the son of a bitch just tries to get in the way all the time. Ask me how I know. So you're constantly teetering and doing this kind of shit. And really, with a CZ75 style gun, it's meant to do a slingshot. I mean, honestly, if you got a CZ75 style gun and you're doing this, okay, try jacking the slide like this and then try to slingshot it, and you'll lose skin off your fingers. I guarantee it, especially if you've been rained on all day. Holy fuck. There's a lot of DNA that I've got in an SP01 tactical someplace. So, not even those are all designed all the way the same, right? So, okay, yeah, we can get away with it, but even still, why would I train for lowest common denominator type stuff? By the way, all these guns have slide lock levers, slide release levers, whatever you want to call it. All of these guns have slide lock / release levers. So, why am I actively choosing to believe that I can't do this? I'm not going to tell people that they can't do this, right? Because I'm not going to automatically assume that my students' end capabilities. Okay? Like, I'm sorry. There's a lot of dudes that have shot a lot of fucking people in the modern era that use modern techniques. Okay? They're living proof that this shit actually does kind of work. Okay? There's a lot of cops that are not very well trained that do this shit, and they've survived their gunfights. It's not an impossible task, I'm sorry. So, that and just telling me you're gonna miss. How? It's right there. Whatever. Point is, though, it's really not a big deal. Right? Now, I know I've sat here and beat the shit out of this over and over and over again. What I am gonna tell you at the end of all this is master what you like. Be adept at everything else. Just because you don't like jacking the slide on a handgun doesn't mean that you're not going to have a slide go home on an empty follower or on a follower only. When you start using handguns a lot or rifles a lot, the springs start wearing. So you need to be adept at everything, but you must master what you like. And the thing that you master, don't get it twisted. The thing that you master, you have to justify in your own mind, and you have to think critically about it. Okay, I went through a particular journey, and this is where I've arrived. Okay, at the moment, it could change. I don't think so in this particular case, but this is where I've arrived, and I started in the other camp. Okay, so you have to be able to think critically, and you have to be able to analyze what it is that you're doing. Is what it is you're doing actually good to go, right? Because if you practice this to a level to where, like, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner is trying to get that multi-level black belt, if you're trying to better yourself in that capacity, you need to constantly evaluate whether or not what you're doing is actually good to go. Because if you're practicing at that level, if you're training at that level, good enough is never good to go. Okay? You need to basically hate yourself into success, because nothing is good enough. So, I've been going on for about 29 minutes now. So, I'm going to bookend this here. If you want to come train with us, absolutely. Link for the website is in the description below. Same thing for the Facebook page and all that other shit. You know, I'm just going to leave it there because I think I've covered it. So, that said, guys, remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.